We started. I don't really know what was happening there, but it just wanted to happen. And there it was. The fist dance. That's funny. That's
I can't hear it. I can't hear it.
Are we supposed to be dancing now?
Can you hear it?
No.
Oh, there it is.
We like to start every episode with some chair dancing. I know.
Oh, that's us talking in the last episode. Sorry, I gotta get my audio figured out when we do these chair dances because you're doing it without any kind of music. Anywhoozers, we are live on episode 19 of Pithy Musings. This is a very, very, very special day and episode. My name is Eva Van Krugel with Fervor Leadership Coaching and Consulting. I am situated in the Pacific Northwest in Victoria, BC. Carolyn, who are you?
I am Carolyn Berglund. I am the founder and principal of a little organization by the name of Talk Talk. And I'm based in the beautiful city of Calgary, and it's only -7 today as I look at my screen. So that's pretty good. It's been much colder, as you two know. So welcome everyone to episode 19.
Indeed. And for those just joining us for the first time, or maybe it's your second time, Pithy Musings is a podcast on topics tough, timely, and sometimes taboo. We want to put tough things on the table that we think need to be talked about so that we can help humanity to be better. So if you are a leader, an entrepreneur, or you're in a position of influence to culture in an organization of any size, this podcast is made for you. So subscribe to Pithy Musings on YouTube. If you have not, follow us on Spotify. There might be a 2023 playlist in motion.
Well, I must tell our viewers and watchers and listeners that we had an in-person get together, Eva and I, earlier this week, and there might have been some dancing in the living room. That's where we created the new playlist. Anywho,
it's diverse to say the least.
Yes.
So we so appreciate you being here. We're so excited about the two beautiful human beings that are joining us today, one for the second time. Clients, friends from all over, you've shared a ton of feedback and more feedback on episode 18 on grief at work than we've had on any other episode. We listened and we want to dig into it at a deeper level. I won't get into the details because we need to introduce these two wonderful people. Over to you, Carolyn.
Yeah, I just want to echo what you just said, Eva. Of the 18 episodes we've done thus far, I have had so many people reach out to me and say, you need to continue that conversation. So I'm honored that Christine is rejoining us and has introduced us to a new friend. I struggle with my gratitude here because what these two have done is taken their own or leveraged their own grief journeys to help others. So there is a ton of expertise in the room here. So Eva and I are going to be learners. So let me start with Christine. I'll just do brief bios and then we'll just get into the conversation. Christine has over 25 years of human resource experiences. She's an accredited coach. One of her approach is grounded, and I love this, in integrity, inclusion, and compassion. I think it's so aligned with what Pithy Musings is all about. She has her own personal grief story where she shared with us last time that she lost her older sister and frankly best friend at a pretty early age. Through that experience, she sought out some grief help. And then through that, she ended up being a grief counselor or facilitator and has been doing that work for over 23 years. So, wow. Just to disclose, Christine and I have known each other for about a decade now. So welcome back.
Thank
Christine
you.
has graciously introduced us to Cindy Lang. So get a hold of this background. She is a registered social worker. She is also something called an ontological coach. I can't wait to learn more about that. I looked it up in advance. It's absolutely fascinating. She also offers grief and loss workshops. In the last 4 years, she has supported those impacted by cancer or have been diagnosed with life-limiting disease. She also has over 14 years of co-facilitating grief and loss groups with an expertise in spousal loss. She also has a personal experience with grief. She was widowed in 2005 when her husband, Mike, unexpectedly passed away. So I am so honored to have you both here, because I think we, in the next 45 minutes or hour, I think are going to be able to help a lot of people out there. Particularly, we're doing this in December around the holidays. So maybe let's start, as we did last time, for those that perhaps didn't see episode 18, with just defining what grief is. So Cindy, maybe I'll get you to start. I'll get you right into the deep end here. How do you define grief?
Well, it's such a good question, because we define grief anything that we value that we have lost. And of course, death, we know that we grieve when we've lost someone that we value, and we also grieve when we've lost a thing or things we value. So when we go back to that cancer piece that you brought up and life-limiting diseases, I saw a quote one time that said, the grief begins when the bad news is broken.
Yeah.
And so when we take death aside and look at a diagnosis, look at any kind of life transition, or what I would say a life-altering event, anything that has changed our life from what we knew before, puts us in a response of loss. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, so it's not just about death, is it, Cindy? It's much broader than that.
Yeah, like we look at grieving the life that we imagined. So when I think about when Mike died and I was 37, we had a little guy, he was 2. Mike died from injuries that he sustained just from a pedal bike accident. So his injuries did not seem at the time like that they were life-threatening, but 5 days later, he unexpectedly died in the hospital. And part of that, so grieving the life that I imagined for myself and for Thomas. And that's, it's not really tangible, that loss, is it? It's like those secondary losses and grieving the future. There's millions of little losses that come with a life-altering event. And that's why I like to make that expansion of a life-altering event. Anything that comes into our personal life that is life-altering. And the interesting thing is that what I value and what somebody else values is very different. So if I'm supporting somebody who has been diagnosed with cancer and they're in treatment, and let's say treatment's finished and now they have neuropathy, so hands and feet, maybe it's just their feet that are numb, and maybe they got their grounding and their hope and their empowerment from walking in the forest, nature walks, and now they don't have any balance and they can't walk anymore. So for them, that would be experienced as a loss. And somebody next door, maybe that's not what they value. Maybe they value working out or swimming or something else. So it really, it becomes that fine of a detail that we don't value the same things. And therefore, our experience of loss is so personal.
I think some of what we want to make sure we explore today is how the individual experiences it, in what ways, and how we support one another. And we'll eventually get there. But I really want to honor that you've just shared more about your story.
Thank you.
For many of us, certainly me, I'm like, "Ugh," and I feel it right now, right? I can't even imagine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like a bomb went off in our life, and our life was planned out, and to come back from that and reconstruct, research shows, this is the interesting thing too, is that for spousal loss, the latest research from a resiliency center in the US talks about 5 to 8 years for integration for spousal loss. And who would ever think that? Because after a year, you're good now, right? Like everything, you've patched up your life, you're moving on, new relationship, are you keeping the house? Are you dating? All these things that are not really myths, but just it's misinformation. We're not in school, we don't learn about grief. Usually we learn about it and we be trained in it, but through a lived experience.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about last time with Christine was that in leadership, and that's predominantly the area in which I play, we don't teach leaders how to deal with people coming back from work. And Christine, I think you said, how many days are people allowed for bereavement?
So I'd say the common policy is 3, but 5 if you have to travel.
So if we think about what Cindy just shared, 5 to 8 years for integration. We've heard about some research around 3 to 5 years. Now we're hearing 5 to 8, depending on the kind of loss. But 3 days is not enough, especially if each person is navigating it so differently, depending on the relationship to the loss. When you talk about integration, can you share with us what that means? Either one of you.
Christine. Okay, so when we think about grief, it's absorbing, adjusting, and integration. So absorbing what has gone on here. The person I'm loving has died. Adjusting to life without them. And then what comes with that we know it's not linear. Christine talked about that last time, and I'm sure that will come up again. So it's not a linear process, but this integration is I'm now living fully in my life with this loss woven in. And I remember in year 6, when the first research came out, in particular with spousal loss, 17 years ago, it was 5 years for spousal integrate, to integrate spousal loss into your life. And I thought, well, that certainly cannot be true. And it doesn't mean in those 5 to 8 years that you might repartner, that you are not laughing at jokes, that you don't find your humor. You find your humor, you're connecting with people, you're building, you're reconstructing and rebuilding your life mostly all the time. I remember in year 6 looking in the mirror and thinking, there you are.
Yeah.
I remember you. This familiarity of the person I was before Mike's death. And so that integration piece is about living fully in your life with that loss woven in.
Well, and you both talked about seeking help. So in your situation, Christine, with your sister, and then Cindy with your husband, Mike, actually going out and getting some help.
Yeah, for me, I probably sought help earlier after my sister's passing, but it wasn't really until I found folks who specifically focus on grief that I probably had the biggest shift. But I probably didn't find that for about 3 years after. And so there's a bit of flailing up until then, until I was able to actually just ground myself in understanding it differently, understanding the impact on me, how you move through it, how it's not linear. It's not like after 3 years, I thought, oh man, I'm stuck. Like I'm still really sad. And you know, I never really had lost someone of that, like that closeness before in my life. So you also bring a lot of judgment on yourself, right? I'm stuck, I'm not doing this right. And until you have an opportunity, I think, to really understand what the experience is, what you're experiencing, the normality of it, and actually show like you actually have moved forward in these ways. And then Cindy talked about, you know, those three kind of what we call the cycles of grief. You start to have more confidence, but also understanding that, you know, it's not linear. And while you might be in what you might feel is more integration, things can trigger you and bring you back.
Right.
And I use an example from me from last week. So coming up on December 12th is my sister's anniversary when she passed away. And so every year for, this is the 26th year, we are going to put an in memoriam in the paper. And my sisters and I do it together, and I submitted it. And the next day, like it's, even though it's been 26 years, the words, the thinking of that day, like I felt really quiet the next day. And for people who know me, they know that's not normal. But I just needed to like spend some time thinking about, like, it kind of brings you back a little bit. Because even though it's been 26 years, there are times where it can feel 26, like it's 26 days. But that doesn't mean that I haven't moved through. It just means that it's with you in different ways, and it comes up in different experiences and different times.
We've talked about, oh, go ahead, Caroline. I can see the inhale, and there's a question. Go for it.
No, I mean, as you're talking, I think, and I hope this for those that are tuning in, is that you think about and put yourself in our conversation. So I'm doing the same thing, and I'm thinking about my dad committed suicide when I was 12, almost 13, and we didn't seek help. And so I think what I'm really grounding in is that help part is probably pretty critical to getting through those three stages that you talk about, Cindy, of absorbing, adjusting, integration. Later got help, but not initially for, you know, those first few years, which I think was maybe a miss.
And I think also that where people start to seek help or understanding differently is in that adjusting piece, because there's finally a recognition that I need to acknowledge this has happened, but man, this feels really hard and mucky and yuck. And that's that, you know, that adjusting / confrontation piece that's in the middle. And I think that's where, you know, triggers will bring you and bring it back into over the years and over the decades.
I'm wondering, oh, Cindy, I saw an inhale. Please proceed.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say that our bonds to love never dies.
It's true.
And that can be a really validating piece, and that perhaps then we can take the pressure and expectation off ourselves that there is, you don't have to get over. There's nothing to get over when a person you're loving, and you notice I say loving, that I talk in the present about that person, is you don't stop loving them. And the other thing I was thinking of is that when you were talking about help, and I sought out a group like Christine did with young spousal loss, because I was a young spouse at the time, it's not the group you want to be a part of course, but what you do end up doing is meeting this common bond of a like loss, as Christine mentioned, brings you together. And the validation and affirmation that I'm not crazy, what I'm experiencing, it's obviously not okay, but in the realm of this loss and deep mourning that I'm going through, these responses that I'm feeling are with what I should be feeling. And they're not symptoms, they're responses. And research shows that talk support, talk therapy for bereaved people who are experiencing loss, and remember, it's a life-altering event, that is the most profound helping tool. Is because grief is like a pressure cooker, and it builds and it builds. And when we get a chance to share about it, provide space, then the pressure goes down. And of course, it builds again. And that's where the talk support or talk therapy, whether it's individual or group, is, for some people, I know for me, it was life-saving to, and 17 years, those women and I are still friends today.
Yeah.
So,
I'd love to ask a question on the topic of help. And because it's such a vast topic, I'd love to hear from all three of you. What was the most profound help? If you could go back to the earlier days, what was the most impactful form of help for all three of you?
I would say for me, I would have to say the grief group that I was a part of, and the individual grief support that I got from a counselor facilitator at the time. I would say those, and then family support. Some of my friends left, and that happens. The people sometimes who we expect to be there for us, it's difficult. They're trying their best. Sometimes we just don't know how. I'm not sure I could have been a really good friend to someone who was deeply bereaved before my first husband died, because I wouldn't have the capacity, I wouldn't have the knowledge. And then some friends who you never expect come out of the woodwork and are there to walk alongside you. So for me, I would say those three.
Yeah. Which is even more grief, the loss of or change in friendship.
It's true.
And dynamics of friendships change.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's hard.
Yeah. Thanks, Cindy.
Yeah, I would say for myself, I would say something similar. So when I found a sibling group, so what I would say about sibling loss is, and I from my own experience, but having co-facilitated as a volunteer sibling loss groups now for 23 years, there's a very common theme of it feels a bit like disenfranchised grief, where it's not really recognized. So for all the right reasons, people will ask, how are your parents? How's her husband? How are her kids? All the right questions to ask. Or other people, like how are the parents? But they sometimes forget that your relationship, and this is a person, and your siblings sometimes know more about you than anybody in the world. And it could be one of your closest relationships you've had. Very few people ask me how I was doing. Very few. And to go to a group of folks who are all lost a sibling was it was truly life-changing for me, because similar words, I felt validated, I felt understood, I felt heard. I remember going to and Cindy and I have done a lot of education nights together. But I remember, I say this one all the time. I remember going to, when they used to be a thing, I loved giving cards to people, like going to a Hallmark store or wherever and getting a card. And I went to buy one day for someone, and I noticed that there was more cards for loss of pet than there were for loss of sibling. Wow. Literally 6 to 1. So for me, that was, I gotta be honest, that was probably the major thing, was finding a group that was specifically for sibling, and then being able to then sit with folks over the years with sibling. It just continues to help and continues to validate. Yeah.
So still to this day, you access that support.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely.
And just even sitting with folks in grief, honestly, you learn new things about yourself and humanity every single day that I have a chance to do that. Yeah.
So all these beautiful years later, there's a beautiful example of that it's not a linear process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
All bundled up. all bundled up.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
No.
No,
Oh, here we go.
here we go.
I wanted to like talk about this as it relates to work. So we have three very different examples. Eva, I'm sure you have examples of grief and loss in your life, right?
Oh, yeah.
So whether it be illness or car accident, murder or suicide, like whatever the death, someone comes back into the office after their 3 to 5 days. And Christine, one of the things that it really resonated with me that you said last time is people don't know what to say, so they don't. But it's almost like pushing your comfort zone as a leader or colleague or peer or direct, whatever the relationship is, to say, tell me about that person, which I thought was really sage advice. Is there other advice that you might offer around what to do when someone reintegrates back into the workforce after a death?
One of the things I thought about after part one that I know I didn't mention is I actually really believe that as someone is coming back to the workplace after a loss, that there's a lot of value for the leader to reach out to that person to say, how might we help you come back to the office? i.e., like, what do you want people to know? What do you want, like, how might we support? Are you comfortable with people coming and asking you? And that way it gives the person returning back to work a little bit of almost comfort that they're going back with some level of conversation, but even to say, I'm not sure if I can talk about it yet. Please let people know that, but maybe give me a bit of time and I probably can. Whatever it is that's right for them. And I think it's really important for the leader to meet with a team to say, there is discomfort coming back to the workplace. Like I mentioned in part one, it's one of the top 3 things I think we hear about, like the hardest things, like having to reintegrate into life when you're not really ready yet, is one of them is going back to work. And so how do we even understand what folks might need or not need? But the one thing I would say, if they say, I'm not sure yet, don't not ever follow up with them again, because they might just feel like once they're in a little bit longer, they might just feel more comfortable. But for them to come back to total silence always is, I think, could be really difficult for folks.
I wonder, my hunch is that we're uncomfortable with grief. We're uncomfortable with, underneath that, we fear emotion. We fear loss of control. We don't, maybe this is my opinion and maybe my own experience, whether it's through support or lack thereof, or how I've coped, not knowing if it was okay to show emotion or to check in, or not knowing what to say. And that there's these perceived and real barriers. One of the comments you made, and when we had a little pre-chat, Christine, was the workplace expects you to be who you were before the loss as well.
Yeah.
Can you say more around, some of the barriers you're noticing and what needs to be overcome at work? What do we need to normalize?
I think I'll start. I think we need to normalize that when someone comes back from a loss, and to Cindy's point, I don't just think that as a death. It could also be health, like something that someone has gone through health-wise. I think we're probably we have a lot more guidance around that, because there's usually a process around that. But I think one thing I would say off the top of my head, Eva, is we need to normalize that this is not normal for the person. They've just gone through something significant that will not take 3 months or a year. And how might we give them permission to be able to come back in a way that honors what they're able to absorb? And I don't mean that for long term, because over time they might just need something more overt for support. That it might include a leave or something like that. But I think that initially we just need to be okay with the fact that they're not going to come back and nail that spreadsheet in the first week, right? Or nail that presentation. Like, they're not going to come back and perform and be as productive. But I think some people also want to do that. They want to come back to what is normal for them, because it also creates some control for what might have been out of their control in terms of a loss, and what they may not feel in control of in terms of what they're experiencing. So I think just being able to watch someone and how are they going, and touching base with them is really important. And
you've mentioned health. You mentioned it could be loss of a loved one, it could be health. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Cindy. I really want to hear what you have to say. I also just, in all of this, love to understand, you know, what other things qualify as grief. When we think about the workplace, I think we may be, and in the world, I think we might be kind of unaware of that which constitutes, or that which might qualify as worthy of grief.
An illness. And when I think about, if we look again at the, I call it the afterlife of, and I'll use cancer again as the example. Before diagnosis, you could be working you could be at the top of your game. Really, if you're performance driven, you're working, 60, 80-hour work weeks, and then you get a diagnosis, you have treatment, let's say you have clear margins, and now it's time to go back to work. And what has been altered is your self-esteem and confidence. And I wanted to talk about that with loss, because we don't really talk about self-esteem and self-confidence, how much it can for some people be shattered, some people fractured, some people altered. And that can produce responses of anxiety. And then you come back to the workplace. So part of the anxiety is, well, I'm very fatigued and I'm exhausted. And I don't have that physical, energetic capacity to work as I did before. And then we look at cognition, and what about brain fog? What about forgetfulness, difficulty to concentrate? We know that those are some of the cognitive responses to grieving something we've lost that we value. And so when we look at grieving the loss of living your life in the way it used to be, we look at relationship changes, navigating lost dreams, life changes, this security and safety in the world. So if you imagine I've been married, started a family, we have our whole life ahead of us. And then just in a blink of an eye, it all changed. And Carolyn, you've had that experience. Christine, you've talked about that experience. And so that safety and security in the world. I'm young, I was only 37. What did we talk about? Living a long life together. And now death for me only happened in the outer world, that kind of tragic death at that age and that time in our life. And then all of a sudden, it came knocking at my door. And just that sheer reality of, I can't believe this has happened to me. So that safety and security. And
you know what comes to mind as you're talking, Cindy, is that, and I was thinking about this morning, is that we all kind of live this individual journey. I'm here making it happen, but I know it sounds super cliche to say, but it does take a village, right? Like, where's the humanity in all of this? Like, we should be coming together and supporting each other as human beings, having a human existence. This is not taboo. This happens to everybody, whatever iteration it happens to.
And where's this? We have safety manuals. Don't we have policies and procedures in workplaces. And I would say perhaps what's missing often is a grief and loss manual that a leader, an employer can take out, can read. What do I expect? What should I expect? And we know everybody's grieving experience is very personal, deeply personal. It's not the same. But what about opening that before your employee is coming back to work? What can I expect? Well, I can certainly expect that they may not be working at the same level of performance they did before. and that their concentration might be off, their focus, their self-esteem. You know, what if we knew that?
Yep.
What if we knew that? And what if we, as employees, were coming back into the workforce and maybe we haven't had the information given to us about grief support where we're living? And what if we got a nice little, you know, maybe we won't call it a manual, but a what to expect.
Yeah.
And I don't that's what that safety manual. We need a
I think you're onto something, Cindy. If that doesn't exist, we should create that. And in addition to some of the other things that we've talked about, what about, because I'm dealing with this with a friend, so I'd love to get both of your perspectives, dealing with a long-term Alzheimer's situation, and then they just passed away. And I heard others around this person say, well, you kind of knew it was coming, right? So you were able to brace yourself. And because we had this episode, I wasn't entirely sure what to do. But what I ended up saying was, it doesn't make it any easier, the fact that you've known for a long time. Yeah. Tell me about that person. So that came directly from you, Christine, but could have I done something differently, more or less, anything around that type of situation?
I think what you did was beautiful. I you know, what I heard and what you said around, like, well, you knew it was coming, was that kind of at least ... you know, and that's like that. Some of those words can make just people feel even more, you know, less comfortable grieving openly. I love what you said. And I'd be curious what the response was when you said that.
They said, absolutely. It doesn't make it any easier.
Yeah. So it sounds like you also validated it for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a myth that was covered. I can't remember. At some point we've talked about the myth as well of losing someone that's not close. And, you know, and sometimes the response has crept in there with, well, you weren't that close, so
like, you're okay, right? Like, you're fine.
Yeah, I have definitely experienced that in my family circle, and absolutely devastating to the person most impacted by the loss.
Sure.
So what, you know, what any ideas or perspectives to help people demystify or debunk that myth?
I think the most important thing is it's a time to release all assumptions. Like, what you might know of the relationship is this big, and based on, you know, sound bites that you might know about them, or you know, deep-rooted experiences that they have. And so what I would say is maybe pausing any going in with assumption, or, you know, I lost both my parents. Well, was your dad harder than your mom? Like, no, like, they were different. So I think it's, again, about being curious and supportive and present, than going in with any assumptions that minimizes someone's grief. Because I think if you don't have a close relationship, then what you're probably experiencing too is grief about the relationship that you missed.
Right.
So there's lots more sometimes to something like that again doesn't surface or isn't on the surface.
So in, you know, it's so many varying degrees of relationship, and we see the same thing for people with pets too.
Oh, yes.
You know, saw a friend completely, I'm going to go as far as to say at times debilitated by grief for maybe 4 years.
Yep.
And yet I remember being in a circle where someone was just doing the best they knew how. And they're like, at some point you've got to move on. It was a dog. And my heart, I think, pretty much rolled out to the highway and out.
Yeah.
But that, you know, that's my own judgment. That person was trying the best they could in the absence.
100%. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of compassion that we also need to have for folks who are trying their best. Right?
Yes.
And because people do try, and I really do think that people say things in the spirit of helping, regardless of how it might be received. But I think like these conversations might create some awareness of maybe how helping can look different.
Yeah, and there is no manual, right? And I think it does come down to intent. Even if I don't do it exactly right, I think people can read intent. If my intent is to help and hear you, even if I'm not saying the right things, I think that's still digested. I would like to, because we're going into the holidays right now, and if we're all human beings having human experience going into the office and whatever, and people are dealing with stuff, how do we navigate that? Not only in the workplace, but in our personal lives. Cindy?
Yeah, I'm going to start with compassion for ourselves. I think often we have the least compassion for ourselves. Kristen Neff, I love her work on compassion. She does this exercise where you imagine your situation that you're in, and so we think about the holidays, the people or the pets that we're going to miss, or the life that we were living before that's been altered. And if you think about a situation and you imagine that now your best friend is telling you about that situation, someone you just care so much about, and you're the listener, and you imagine, what would I say to this person? How would I respond? And probably you would respond like, wow, it must be really hard. You know what? I'm here for you. You want to go grab dinner, coffee? What can I do to help? And then Kristen F talks about, can you now talk to yourself like that? Can you show yourself that same compassion? And if not, then the curious question is why? So if we start with compassion, I know this is a really hard time for you. This is what you're saying to yourself. And it's not easy. And let's just do one day at a time. You know, how would that change things for us if we were able to offer ourselves that same compassion? Someone told me once about when you're going to a function, have your getaway car. That's the next tip. The getaway car.
Yep.
So then, because you can walk, you can have, oh, I'm going to go do it. It's probably good to get out and connect. I'm going to do it. And then you get there wherever it is. And a half an hour in, you're like, I have to get out of here. Where's the exit? So a getaway car.
I love that.
And I think what's important about that is the permission, like giving yourself permission to take some risks and try, but give yourself permission with an exit strategy if you just can't. And if you're going with someone, let them know that you need their support, that, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. Because sometimes the anticipation of doing something is worse than the actual event. But when you're there and you're like, I got to go, then go. And I think the holidays is a time of when you need to give yourself permission to take some space, because it's not a time of space. Right? There's lots of obligations and events and expectations and joy, right? And
it's the most wonderful time of the year,
right? And actually just creating, even if it's whatever is feasible, because folks have they have children and other things they need to do, but even just giving yourself 10 minutes to go somewhere and just breathe and just give yourself permission to be in a space to acknowledge what's happening before you have to go back out and exude joy again. But it's those things that I think are really important at this time, and just, letting people know what you need. That
permission is key to Kristen, because can we give ourselves permission to maybe change some traditions? Change, maybe it's not the year for us to host Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
Maybe, and rituals. I was thinking about bringing rituals in, and sometimes rituals are comforting. Sometimes traditions are comforting, and of course, sometimes they're painful, and you need to alter them. But rituals, so toasting, if it's someone who's died, that you're loving, can you do a toast? Can you light a candle? Can you put something on the tree if you're having a Christmas tree? Can you and like I love Christine what you said about having a buddy. And do you have somebody that you can call and share what you're going through?
Yeah, I love that.
And it's hard sometimes because of these expectations that we have on ourselves, and of course traditions are, you know, can be very, very important, and then other times they can cause tremendous stress and anxiety because we might not be there, might not have the energy, the capacity to follow through with them. And can we give ourselves permission to alter things?
Yeah. I think also from a support perspective, and this can be at work or in personal lives, if you feel comfortable enough with the relationship with the person, even just saying to them, I know this is going to be, this could be a hard season. How are you doing? And what are you going to be doing for the holidays? Because I actually think the holidays, and I just finished a loss of parent group, and you know, the holidays is a hard, it's bearing down on people. And just for them being able to talk about what the holidays means or what they can and can't do, it's a distraction for people if they're not able to talk about it.
Yeah.
And what is it about the holidays? You know, we know some celebrate holidays the way, you know, the North American way, and other people celebrate in different ways, or some people don't celebrate at all. But there's something about this time of year that brings out a lot of anxiety, emotion, reignites grief. What is that? I want to state the obvious, but I don't want to make any assumption. What is it from your points of view?
It's probably a few things. The busyness that it produces. So if you're celebrating Christmas and you have to buy gifts, let's say you're buying gifts, the shopping, going into all of that, combined with everything else that you're navigating in your life, and family dynamics. What about who's at your table and what's your family like? And are there some stressful things that are happening there? And already you can feel people's anxiety and yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
I think also if you have children, like the children, like this is a exciting season for them. And so you kind of have to show up for kids and make it the season that you know children want this season to be, which is why that can also create, you know, for some people that's a lot of energy to be able to do that when, you know, you're crushed inside. And then that's why, like I mentioned, like just find 10 minutes of space where you can also just be with how you need to be, you know, for yourself, and just find those breaks. Because there's also other folks who are expecting things of people very differently this year. I mean, I think about going to a in-laws, like not mine, just to be clear, I don't want but like, you know, they don't understand the loss, and so they're just having Christmas as they usually would, and you having to show up and kind of be that part to be in that family. So that might just be an example.
Like the expectation.
No, you raise a good point though, Christine, around putting on that happy face, right? I gotta put on the happy face, and some of it is real, right? You've got these kids that, you know, you want to create a joyous experience, but inside you're feeling frankly depressed. You know, that's got to be pretty exhausting. Or yeah, sorry, Cindy, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and that the permission we don't feel as often to experience that sadness and participate in Christmas.
Yeah.
Accepting within ourselves and being given the grace among others. It's a really sad time for me. My dad passed away Christmas Eve last year. And you know, if already I can start to feel it. It's December 9th, and you begin to remember where you were, what you were doing. Your body remembers. We have the experience. That's ontological coaching. It's mind, body, and emotions. And so when we experience loss, we're feeling it in our bodies.
True.
And so as a loss, you know, whether a milestone, an anniversary, an occasion like Christmas, your body begins to show signs that it's remembering. And that's what I've been feeling, that, you know, this time is coming and this is what happened. And my dad was 90. And so who gives you the space to be able to talk about what that experience was like for me? Because you Christine mentioned about that disenfranchised grief. If people ask you right away, well, how old was your dad? If I say 90, then, you know.
At least you had that many years with them.
Oh.
Right,
And
that's the at least ... right? Like,
that's right. And so I was with my dad, was beside him, and boy, that was an experience. And then I flew back home that night here so I could wake up with the kids and my partner for Christmas morning. And I was like, wow, I've just been through something. And can I give myself the grace and space to acknowledge that I just, as Ram Dass said, I just walked my dad home. And he says, we are all here just walking each other home. And that is something, and that takes time to process. What have I just been through? And it's difficult because if you don't have anybody sometimes in your life who hasn't experienced loss, that it can be very difficult to relate. So.
And you know what I want to also offer is I just also want to honor all the folks who might be listening who you know, step in and support. And there's like a woman that works in the program that that Cindy and I are part of, that her tagline is show up and shut up. Like, it's just show up and come beside but you know, I just want to honor there's lots of people also who do that, and leaders. And so, you know, I just want to honor that as well, because I've also seen some incredible support for folks and people who don't know what they're doing, but they show up and shut up.
They're doing,
yeah.
Is there anything, you know, when you think about the close of this episode and the day carries on, things heat up, is there anything that you may regret not sharing that feels important, whatever it is?
I think I said this, I don't know why I'm getting emotional saying this, but I think it alludes to what I mentioned in episode 1, is if it feels right, ask the person about the person. Ask them about their dog. What was their favorite toy? I lost 2 dogs. Let me tell you, I can go on for hours. But there's a power in storytelling, and I think that's what Cindy was saying around, you know, like talk therapy. Like, there's a power in storytelling, in healing. And I know it's probably, I have said it already, but it's probably just worth repeating. And I'll just stress again, or highlight again, one of the most powerful things to do besides that is release all assumptions about what that should and shouldn't mean for someone. Yeah.
I think about just really a contribution, what Christine mentioned about honoring, you know, everybody who does come out and show up for other people, but also to know that we really are mostly doing our best. And we've been through a particularly extraordinarily difficult time with the pandemic. Many people have experienced all different kinds of losses,
yes,
and stresses. and then the pile up, and then it can be difficult to be there for others as well. And we've seen a lot of that going through the last 3 years. And self-compassion for all the people who, self-compassion for when we don't know what to say, self-compassion for when we say something, we walk away and think, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. That was, kindness to ourselves, not to beat ourselves up so much about if nothing comes out of our mouth because we're scared and it's awkward. And so that's what I think about. I think about to be kind and compassionate to ourselves. And because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And sometimes when we know better, we do better. And just don't know. Yeah.
I feel like from today we could write a book of quotes. There's like,
show up and shut up.
that one is really good. There's a few others, and I can see like a whole t-shirt factory for people getting into grief.
It's interesting because Pithy Musings really, it's got a pretty big mission for such a small little podcast, which is to make humanity a better place. And I do think that this conversation will touch people quite profoundly, as did the first episode with you, Christine. I think the work that you both do, volunteer and otherwise, I think is the real work here. You're making lives better. So, I mean, from one soul to another, I just say thank you for being the people that you are.
Yeah, honored.
Well, thank you for creating this space for this conversation. That's pretty amazing to do that. And thanks to Cindy for Bring a Friend Day.
Christine for choosing me to be the friend that she brought today, and to you both for opening up this space. To you both are also changing lives and changing humanity. So thank you.
Oh, bless y'all.
Should we do the question?
Yeah, and if people want to get a hold of either one of you, I think we talked about being able to reach Christine and Cindy on LinkedIn. Is that the preference?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be many listeners and viewers who are going to want to continue the conversation, and who knows, perhaps enlist your services. Yes. And your beautiful work in the world. Okay, so something that we do, and Christine will be familiar with this. Cindy, maybe you've had a little peekaboo at some former.
I did, I think.
Okay, well, so last time, Christine, we had a question for her, and she answered it with such poise. And then we asked her, well, what would you like to ask our next guest? Well, Cindy, that's you. So, Christine, do you remember the question?
I do.
Oh, you do? Oh, I won't put you on the spot. I have it right here.
Oh, then go ahead.
Okay. What is your greatest superpower that you can use to support someone in grief?
Compassion. Compassion, and that's the first word. Compassion. How must they be feeling? That is the question. How must they be feeling? And if I can tap into that, then it's a start.
That's beautiful. And what question? So we have quite the lineup for 2023. we really do, actually.
Is this for me now?
This is for you, Cindy.
It's your turn.
The pressure. And it can be anything. It doesn't necessarily even have to be about grief. It could just be anything around humanity, more human. So what question might you have of our next guest?
Ooh, that is a really good question.
Yeah. And we can chair dance if it helps.
Oh boy, would it ever.
Here, we're all chair dancing for you.
Okay.
My husband's horrified by that.
And I'm an enabler, so.
What question would I want? One question, this is the first question that came to mind, is what brings you joy?
Yeah.
What brings you joy? I think that kind of falls off the table first in our own lives, and especially what we've all been through the last few years, and even going into this next year. What brings you joy?
Yeah.
And it just cuts all the bull crap, right?
Yeah. The bull crap.
Right? It just, what brings you joy is we'll be interested to see what the answer is, but I've already gone to my own answer.
I think I've already gone to my own answer too. But we could end up just doing a whole other episode and just keep on going on. But to close it, I can't thank you both enough. I'm humbled, I'm touched, my eyes are hydrated, I'm grateful. Over to you, Carolyn.
Yeah, so we want you to stay tuned for episode 20. That's going to be in January. Really great guests. Like I said, we got some good lineups. So if you want to subscribe, you know how to do that.
Just click on the old click on the YouTube channel for Pithy Musings. You can follow us on Spotify if you want to keep putting the funk back into being human. Some people go, well, what the heck does that mean? We just want to enable a healthier humanity through leadership and culture at work. That's why we do what we do. Feel free to share the episode with your friends, your family, and I'm going to say the word community for Carolyn's partner, Peter. That's for you, Peter. And do comment and tag, because we do random draws for the deliciously large Pithy Musings mug. If you have feedback, ideas, questions, musings, you can reach Carolyn at talktalk.ca and myself, Eva, at livewithfervor.com. And so until next time, we wish to say, stay
pithy, keep musing. Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.